Hey everyone, we're here with another holiday chat. I'm joined by Sophia, who has a little bit of experience with the wedding industry. And I guess today we're going to be talking about a bridal salon. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first? Because you have some degree of background that would be applicable to this business, right?
That's correct. Yes. So, my background is in both in-store retail as well as corporate retail. And I also have in the past had a wedding planning and event planning business. That was about almost 2 decades ago. So it's been some time that I've been out of the industry. However, I am familiar with that target consumer. So when this business came on the market, I was interested and I thought I'd explore it. I'm at the point now where, I could really use your help with whether or not I should move forward, given the financials.
Okay. All right. And and so this business, can you sort of describe it so we can create an image in our mind of what it's like? Because I think everyone has an idea what a bridal salon is like, but may not match exactly what's here.
Yes, sure. So it's well, let me first tell you that the salon was opened almost 15 years ago.
Okay.
And from what the seller has shared with me, it was opened because well, originally there were two partners in this business that started it, and the other partner had recently gotten married and had a awful experience going to a bridal salon to purchase a wedding gown, and really saw an opening in the market to provide a more kind of consumer friendly experience for brides to be. And so they decided to open this business, and it's been around for almost 15 years, like I said. And since then, there have been some other, boutique size bridal salons that have opened as well. But outside of that, I think where they fit in the market is kind of in the middle. They're not the super high end exclusive designers, nor are they the David's Bridal Salon type
Right.
of
Okay.
business. So they're right in the middle of the market.
Okay. And so people go in there and they have some dresses there. Are these samples, do they end up ordering in whatever you buy, or do they have an inventory of dresses for sale?
That's a great question. So they are the inventory that exists there are all display for try on. They're
Okay.
samples. And then once a bride has decided on her gown, what happens is they place an order. So it's considered a custom order because then
Hmm.
it is sent over to the designer or manufacturer to create that design, and it comes back to them in a couple of months. So in that sense, it's not, there are no off the rack gowns available, if you will,
Hmm.
other than once or twice a year, there's a sample sale of previously tried on gowns,
Right.
and those are available at a discount. But other than that, it is samples.
And when people order the gown, when they make the decision, they get measured and they order, do they place a deposit?
They do. They place a 50% deposit down. And then when the gown comes in, which is typically 4 to 5 months later, they'll come back and pick up the gown and pay the balance at that point.
Okay. All right. And so let's talk about the business. What kind of revenue, what kind of earnings? Tell us about that.
Sure. So the business has been pretty stable the last 3 years.
Hmm.
I'm going to kind of set aside where they are year to date because the financials for that are a little bit kind of difficult to look at, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But in the in the past 3 years, and we're talking post COVID, obviously 21 through 23, it's been pretty stable. They've been just over 2 million in revenues, and then their net have been at around 240.
Okay. So by net, does that mean that does the owner work there full time?
No, okay, let me clarify. What I mean is actually SDE. So that includes what the owner is taking out of the business, in
Okay,
addition to
but
the net income of the business.
but the owner doesn't work there full time.
Not full time. She has
Oh,
a full time manager.
Okay, how much is she working in the business?
She's there about um, 3 half days and 1 full day a week.
Okay, so she's really there half
Half the
part-time,
time.
like
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Part time.
So if there was a full-time owner operator, would the full-time owner operator have that manager there?
No, it wouldn't be necessary.
Okay. So the the definition of seller's discretionary earnings is the amount of money available to a full-time owner operator.
Oh,
So
okay.
in this particular case, um, there's an argument that would say we also need to add back the manager's salary.
Okay. I had
Do
not
you know how
considered
much?
that, but that is a fair point.
Do you know how much they earn?
I do not. I don't have that information broken down.
Okay. So this can play to your advantage because if they have looked at this business considering 240 to be the STE and they
Hmm.
priced it off of that, and a new owner who works full time and doesn't need a manager, let's say not that you would probably find plenty of things for this person to do, but let's just say if you bought it and you ran it full time and you dismissed that person, then you would immediately have an STE that was higher,
Right. Right. That's right.
right? So what are they asking for the business?
They are asking 975 for the business, and that includes an estimated 400,000 in bridal gown inventory.
You mean samples?
Samples, yes, yes. This is where I need your guidance. How
Yeah.
should we be looking at this and valuing it based off of, the actual use of the quote unquote inventory?
Yeah. So the reason I was asking these questions, and I wanted to know about the samples, is because um, over the course of the years that I've been doing this work, I've talked with a lot of people in this industry who year after year, this inventory of samples gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm,
And really, what are the samples? They are effectively a sales aid, right? So
right.
you buy the new model of dress, you buy one sample, and I'm sure they sell it to you at a really good price too, right? Because they want you to sell lots of this dress, the manufacturer,
Right.
and different ladies try it on, and then some people buy, some people don't, and then at the end of the availability of that dress, its value as a sales aid disappears because now you can't order that dress anymore, and then you try to sell it in some kind of liquidation event, right?
Right.
Right. And so ideally, um, do you have any way of knowing how many of each kind of dress ends up being sold?
Not at this point in time, not until we get into diligence.
Hmm. So so in an ideal accounting framework, let's call it, you
Hmm.
would take the purchase cost of that sample dress and you would amortize it over the season of availability. So if that
Okay.
dress was available for 24 months, you would depreciate that dress over the 24 months. And
Okay.
nobody does this kind of accounting. Like, but
Right.
we're doing a mental exercise here, right?
All right.
So so that dress's value as a sales aid disappears slowly over the course of time. And if it cost you $200 and you sold 10 of those dresses,
Hmm.
then you kind of consider that $20 of expense out of each one of those sales was for the because of the acquisition of the sample.
Right.
And then at the end of the availability period, the sample has like been used up, and you took advantage of the sample by selling those other 10 dresses, and you need to have a significant enough margin in those sales to cover the cost of the sample. So in that mental framework, the samples are just purely an expense. You
Okay.
you're just buying them so that you have a showroom unit, and at the end of its availability, it's now worth nothing. But the problem is people want to account for it like a grocery
Right.
store accounts for its inventory, which is not really the same kind of inventory, because in any other kind of retail store, you're buying things, they come in the store, people grab that thing and buy it and leave. And that's not what's happening here. So if you've ever been to like a lighting showroom where they have sample chandeliers hanging down,
Yes.
it's the same scenario, right? Like they've got samples out, and when a given unit is no longer available as a retail unit, they might put it on sale, and somebody buys it and takes it home, right?
Right.
That should not be considered the same kind of sale as the grocery store is making. So these dresses, the purchase of the samples should be considered an expense. Any
Okay.
revenue that comes from a liquidation sale of these sample dresses should be like bonus income,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Because it's not inventory in a traditional sense. Um, any strategy available to try and maximize the value of those samples at the end of their life obviously is going to be beneficial to anyone who operates the business. But you can't consider this to be inventory in the traditional sense.
Okay. So that being said, um, how do you go about valuing the business?
Yeah, based on the earnings and cash flow.
Strictly
So
based off of that?
so so let me ask you this: do they have a balance sheet that did they show you a balance sheet for the business?
No, I haven't seen a balance sheet yet.
So did they expense the purchase of the samples? Does it appear in the cost of goods sold, or did they put it onto their balance sheet as inventory?
That's difficult to tell. Yeah, I'm not able to decipher if they've
You-
expensed it
Because they haven't
or if
shown you a
it's
balance sheet. Like
right, right,
like if they had given you a balance sheet, you would see, oh, inventory has a value, right?
right.
And so that is the only way to really know how they've treated it. So
Okay,
if they've been treating the samples as inventory, what that means is that their cost of goods sold on their P&L is lower than it should be.
okay.
So the business appears to be more profitable than it really is,
Ah,
right? And
right,
like trying to get you to buy the business and pay for these samples that can no longer be used to sell dresses, um, you don't want to buy them.
right.
If there are current sample dresses, like for currently available good, like dresses that you can order,
Mhm.
then they certainly hold usefulness for you as sales aids. So you might say, well, for any current dress sample, I'll pay you like half of what you paid.
Okay,
So you're like splitting the cost with the seller, because you're going to be
right.
able to take advantage of that sample and use it to make sales. But all the old ones, um,
Mhm.
I wouldn't want them. And
Right.
there's a number of different things you can do. You can suggest to them that they do a big sale and sell them all, you know, beforehand, or you can offer to consign them.
Okay.
So they can leave them with you, and you can do some kind of a split, like say, hey, I'll give you, you know, 60-40 or 75-25, whatever, however you want to split for any money I
Okay.
get from these dresses as I try to sell them for you.
Right.
Um, but it's like is dead sample stock.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you on that. So, but in looking at that, then, so would that be aside from looking at the uh, in value in the business with the earnings? Is that above and beyond that, or does that get included? Because I feel like this sample inventory kind of murkies the water, if you will. Because sometimes
Yeah.
I
So
see businesses valued with the inventory and some without.
yeah, it's a way of handling sort of the working capital. But but let me give you an example. Like you said, there's $400,000 of inventory in there now. Do you know how many years of accumulation that might represent? Like, do you know how much every year they have to buy?
I don't know. I have looked at their tax returns and the balance sheet on that, and it looks pretty steady for the last 3 years. They've kept about the same amount of inventory.
So there's inventory on the balance sheet
There is
of
actually,
the
yes,
tax returns.
of
Okay.
the tax returns. Okay.
Yeah.
So they do
So
expense it. Is that correct?
no, so what that means is they're buying these samples and they're putting them into inventory. So an expense only appears on the P&L when a sale is made. So
Oh, I see. That's right. That's right.
right. So when you sell a dress to somebody for $1,000 and it costs you 700, that's when an expense of 700 appears in the cost of goods sold. If if the beauty salon needs a new I don't know, lamp, right?
Hmm.
They're going to go to the hardware store, they're going to buy a lamp, bring it back. That lamp purchase is going to appear in the expenses, right?
Right.
Because because they don't sell lamps. They just needed one for the store, right? And
Right.
so that's the way the samples should be treated. Because the samples are just part of the equipment, as it were, needed in the business to make sales.
Hmm. Okay.
And they're not treating it that way. If they're putting inventory on their balance sheet, they're
Hmm.
treating it like a store would have inventory. So
Okay.
so really what if they're buying, let's say they're buying $100,000 worth of samples a year, they should fully expense it as money spent. And then when they have a end of season liquidation, if they happen to sell $30,000 worth or raise 30,000 in sales from those dresses, you could then subtract that from your expense. You could say our expense
Okay.
was only 70 because we
Right.
we recovered some of the money through this liquidation. But then the rest of those dresses, like how long are you going to keep them? Like I've spoken to people that were looking at businesses like these who tell me like, oh, there's like sample dresses there from 10 years ago. They just keep hanging on to them, hoping someone in the right size wants a semi-retro dress. Like that's not going to happen.
Right.
No bride who's got the money to buy a dress is going to want to be the bride in the 10-year-old dress.
Right. No, understood. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. Yeah, that is a big question mark, if you will, in terms of how, what is the age of these gowns? I mean, I've had one conversation with a seller, but it's been difficult getting information and just getting even the financials and whatnot. I've been very
So
fortunate because I've worked through the broker to do that.
so here are the questions then that you need to ask.
Okay.
Is you need to ask how much is the annual budget for samples? Or
Right.
how much is expected to be spent, and how much do you typically recover on your end of season sample sales?
Okay.
Okay. And so the sales that they're recovering is probably included in the sales figures that you've been shown,
I imagine so. Yes.
right? And so what you have to figure out is the difference. So if they buy 100,000 and they've been recovering about 30, for example, that means that there's 70,000 of new dresses in inventory. You basically need to add that to the numbers you've been shown as an expense.
Okay.
So so the business isn't really earning 240, it's really earning, 170 in that example.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I had not considered how they were treating these samples,
Yeah.
and that does have an impact on the financials.
Like I once knew a guy who was a shoe rep
Hmm.
and um it was much easier for him because the companies would send him a whole big whack of sample shoes, but they would only send him left or right shoes. And they would
So
send
they
the
could not
other
be sold at the
right. They would
end
they
of
would
his
send
life.
the other one to another rep, right? And so he had all these shoes that he could show to people to place orders, but no one would ever buy it, right?
Right.
So it was very clear that this was just it was a prop, and
Hmm.
I don't think he was paying for it. But if he did have to pay for it, he would know this is just an expense of me having something to show people.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great example. I think that really helps
Yeah.
to illustrate. Um,
So the fact that the SDE is 240 and they're asking 975, um, you know, a bridal shop. I did a little bit of research before our call because I knew we'd be talking about this. Um, you know, in the 1 to 5 million range, the SDE multiple for these kinds of things, according to this, is about 2.8 times.
okay.
So 240, which we know is now is too high,
Right.
times 2.8, brings you into the like 600s.
Okay.
So it's quite a ways off.
Right.
And my gut tells me that they are trying to just get a value for all these samples they bought that are still there remaining.
Yes. I think that's clear.
Yeah. Do you know what they might sell for? Are they when they sell these sample dresses, are they just discounting them 20%? Or are they putting them at half price? Like, do you have any idea what the situation is?
I don't know. These are some questions that I have for when I meet the seller in person, which we're trying to get that scheduled. So I had an initial phone call and I asked, as much as I could without having actually seen any financials at that point. But that is the next step for me is to dig deeper. And so this call is great so that I have some additional
Okay.
questions to ask. Yes.
I would try to figure out how they're trying to liquidate them because if a store like this has these samples and they sell them at I don't know 50% off,
Hmm.
in some ways that's not really good, right? Because you're kind of broadcasting to the market that there are big margins and
Right.
um like and so if they're only offering them for like 20 or 30% off as the end of season samples, and everyone knows, okay, they're cheaper because people have tried them on, well, then you're not going to sell as many of them. When in any market, the ease at which you sell something often is tied to financeability, right? So
Right.
we wouldn't sell many houses if there was no such thing as a mortgage, or they'd be selling for a lot lower price. And there wouldn't be many $60,000 cars out there if there was no such thing as a car loan. I had a business meeting once with a lady who ran a ladies' clothing boutique, and she had been in business for like 40 years. And I asked her, I said, how is it that you're able to succeed in this business with all these big national chain stores? And you just have this little boutique. And, I see, people were going into her shop in a continuous line. Like there was
Hmm.
always traffic. And, basically what she said was, well, because I'm one of the few that gives people credit. And then
Oh,
she's
interesting.
so she had a bridal in the back and she had ladies work clothes up front, like professional clothes. And so um, she had her own sort of client list, and there would be people like secretaries and stuff who would come in who would buy like nice pantsuits and things like this, or skirts and all kinds of stuff they could wear in the office. And she would let
Hmm.
people make payments. Okay. What
Oh.
she was doing in the bridal section is people would come in and she would figure out what their budget was. People would say, oh, I can spend $1,000 or something, and she would bring out a bunch of dresses for them to try on, and she would always bring out one that was like $1,500,
Hmm.
right? And people would try it on, and of course they would love it, and they would say, but I can't afford it, so it's $1,500. And she will say, well, look, you told me that you got $1,000, So what we'll do is I'll take that and you can pay me the balance with no interest over the course of the next 12 months. Can you afford that? And people
Oh,
would and she would, the lady would take the dress, right?
right.
And so for liquidating these samples, there's a
Hmm.
bunch of different ways to do it. But instead of a discount sale, for example, you could have a section of the store of dresses available with in-house financing,
Oh, that's interesting.
right? So people
Right,
are still paying the regular price, but with maybe 40% down, they can make payments over 12 months. Now, honestly, if they make the down payment and then go away and never make another payment, and you can't find them again, it's not going to matter because this is your
right,
liquidation strategy.
right,
If they do
right,
make the payments, it's great, right?
right.
But it's a way to push certain product
Hmm.
without cheapening the atmosphere of the boutique.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like that. That's a great idea.
So so you want to find out the amount of samples they buy every year, the average yield on their liquidations to try to figure out what their net cost is on this stuff.
Okay,
Um, find out like how they discount them, like how deeply, et cetera, et cetera.
right.
Um, how does it work with the suppliers? Are there certain different designers that they work with? Or do they have multiple suppliers, or do they have a couple of really important main suppliers at this salon?
They have multiple suppliers. I believe one of them is a main with an umbrella of designers under them. Are you asking about what terms look like?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Well, I was curious if there was a supplier concentration issue, and curious about the terms that are available.
Oh, okay. Well, to answer the supplier concentration, there is one supplier. I don't know what percentage of their business they are. I'd have to dig in deeper there. But
Mhm.
there is one that offers a number of brands underneath that, if you will. And then they have a handful of other designers that are independent.
Okay. And so they're collecting deposits. Did they disclose how much in deposit money they have owing to their customers right now?
No, I don't have that information.
So that's important because that's called deferred revenue.
Right,
It's money they've collected that they haven't earned, and it's going to have to be adjusted to you in some way because you are the one that is going to have to pay for the dress and deliver the dress.
right, right. That was a question I had for you in terms of how, in this situation, how is this typically handled in a business purchase?
So if the business purchase is an asset sale, then meaning you're creating your own legal entity and just acquiring the stuff in their entity, things like this are usually just adjusted on the sale price. If
Okay,
it's a share purchase, then you need to have the cash because if the dress is selling for say 1,000 and I don't know what would your cost be, 500 or 600.
yes, that's about right.
Okay. So if your cost is 600, but the person's made a $500 deposit, you need the $500
Hmm.
to pay the supplier, right? Um,
Right.
now they may be submitting part of that deposit with the order. I don't know if that's the case or not. This is why the terms are important to know
Hmm.
because if
But yes, the terms, what I was told was after the dress has been shipped or delivered. I don't know the exact point in time, but then they have net 30 from then to pay.
okay, so you getting the deposits is critical because that $1,000 retail dress that you are going to have to pay the supplier $600 for, they've collected 500 of that,
Right.
and it's in their cash right now. So that needs to be adjusted on closing.
Okay.
Um, and if it is an asset sale and it just the adjustment simply means you pay them a lower purchase price, it means that you need access to cash in some kind of credit facility or liquid cash because you're going to pay less for the business. Let's say there were, you know, I don't know, 100 dresses that have been ordered, uh, $500 each. It's $50,000. Well, you might pay 50,000 less for the business, but you're going to have to fork out all that money in bills.
Right.
So you're going to have to either have cash someplace else or a line of credit or something to draw upon. So
Okay.
so the operating capital is an important thing here.
Okay.
A business like this can actually operate with negative equity because they're accepting these deposits and the dress takes a couple of months to deliver, right?
That's correct.
And then they could, get the balance of the money from the client when the client picks up the dress, and they might have already spent the first $500 on something else. And the
Mhm.
way they pay the supplier is by getting another deposit from somebody else.
Right.
So a business like this, really, it's like a negative cash conversion cycle because they collect so much money up front. Um, you just can't forget about it when you take over this business because um, you can't let them walk away with cash that was given on sales you have to fulfill.
Right. So I do have a question in regards to that. If um, I understand that, for anything that's got deferred revenue and the buyer is the one to fulfill it, then you need to ensure that you've got the deferred revenue in hand. Um, is there any, do you see there being kind of pushback or negotiations from the seller side in terms of, well, but I made the sale. Um,
Yeah, all the time.
and
Yeah.
okay.
Like they will say, "Oh, I made the sale. I made the sale. It's my money." Um, what you run into sometimes is just a severe case of cognitive dissonance because
Hmm.
because they want their net from the transaction to be as high as possible. They're willing to contort their mental state into
Hmm.
all kinds of different ways to justify why they get all the money.
Right.
And I've heard all kinds of crazy things, but the reality is the reason why you're buying this business and you're willing to pay some amount of money in excess of the value of the tangible things in the business, meaning you're willing to
Hmm.
pay for goodwill, is because you're buying a business that is a going concern with ongoing cash flow, right? And so
Right.
the fact that they've made sales and collected deposits, like, that is for a sale technically that is being made when the dress is delivered. So
Hmm.
so you're paying them goodwill because you have this flow of business. That's why you're
Hmm.
paying them goodwill.
Right.
They can't expect you to pay them goodwill for the business and then keep the sales for the first 6 months.
That's right.
They're
Because the
getting
business may
both.
not survive that.
Exactly. But many business sellers
Hmm.
won't be able to compute that. In fact, there's many instances where I've been dealing with buyers where they'll present this in five different ways and try to explain this. And if the seller is not dealing with the right kind of advisors, the advisors won't be helpful. And so what ends up happening is you end up saying, well, if you can't do it in this way that I'm saying, then the deal just doesn't work for me and I can't do it. And then you end up walking away. And then they'll go talk to other people, they'll go talk to other buyers, and other buyers, even if the other buyers don't think of this, before they get to closing day, they will think of it. And other deals might be made and fall apart. and you just have to keep circling back with the seller saying,
Hmm.
I'm still interested. Like, if you want me to come and take a look again, make another offer, I'm willing to do that. Um, you just have to have the patience and the discipline with yourself to not do a deal that doesn't work for you.
Right. No, I have actually recently come across this same situation that I didn't consider going into making an offer. But in the process of diligence, I realized it was a membership model.
Yeah.
And so there was, certainly deferred revenue there, especially because the model didn't require that the customer utilize their service within, the same month or same period, if you will. They had quite some time to redeem that. And I ended up walking away from the business, but not because of that. But I knew that eventually, if I had continued down the road, that would have been the sticking point because I did bring it up to the seller in the very end, just explaining all the reasons why I decided to walk away from the business. And I brought that up at the very end because I recognized that they had not, they didn't see this, and they were not prepared to even discuss this. And when I brought it up, they had said that, I mean, they said, well, it makes sense. It makes logical sense. However, we've not seen it handled this way, where you reduce the purchase price in the end because they had other people that they knew who had sold similar businesses, and this never came up. So, I mean, in my
Oh,
mind, I thought,
and
well, that's too bad
I,
for the buyer because
well, and I believe it because there are plenty of people out there who just don't know and they make this mistake. And when they figure it out is usually like 6, 8 months in, when
right.
when they realize, oh, we're doing all this work for people that we didn't get paid for.
Right. I mean, there are other actually examples too of not recognizing or realizing that there's some items that need kind of this true up period after the sale, because I'd spoken to someone else who actually purchased another business from the same seller. It was a much smaller business, and I was actually distressed, so maybe it was under different terms. But when I had the conversation with this person, she had mentioned to me, oh, there were some things that I didn't realize till after we closed that the seller should have been responsible for. But here I am paying it out because I didn't
Well,
know.
and was there a seller note?
No.
Yeah. So, if you've taken anything from the stuff that I put out on YouTube, watch the
Hmm.
videos about seller financing, because whenever you buy a business, you want the seller to finance a material chunk of that. And that seller financing note, you need to have in there this note subject to offset in the case of material misrepresentation or undiscovered or undeclared liabilities which affects the buyer's business. And so if that had been the case, those things that person had to pay that should have been paid by the seller, the buyer could have paid those things and then send an offset notice to the seller saying, I had to pay this stuff that was your responsibility, so I'm deducting it from the seller note. And that's really the only way a buyer can truly control, or have any kind of guarantee or warranty that what the seller says is completely true and honest, because you ultimately control the flow of money after the deal has closed. And
Right.
people who pay all cash for a business, whether they borrow the money or they have it themselves, they don't have that option. The only option they have is to, like, I don't know, sue the seller or something. And like that's
Yeah.
crazy expensive, right? And takes
Right.
forever. And who can do that? Um, and 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 then you also need to make sure, like, the attorney that you're working with is familiar with these small business deals, so that special clause is in that note, so that you have that offset ability. And when sellers push back hard against those things, when they say, I won't do that, or I would never do that, like, to me it's like, oh, you don't want you don't want any accountability for anything you've said to me before this deal close. That's a
Right.
red flag, you know?
Right. Right. Oh, yeah. No, I've definitely learned that from your videos. I've been watching your videos for over a year now, and they've been incredibly helpful. And
Good.
yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions in terms of the seller financing piece. And you said a material amount. How would you quantify that?
It's got to be big enough so that it could cover anything that could be one of these problems. Like, and here's the problem in the States, especially with SBA loans. Because the SBA offers such large, high degrees of financing, um, all the sellers out there have heard that people are putting, 5 or 10% down, and the SBA is financing, 80%, and then the seller has to finance 5 or 10%. And so a lot of these sellers, they think, well, that's what I have to do, 5% or something like that. I think that's ridiculous because 5% of the overall price is such a tiny amount of money given the purchase that even if a seller knew they would lose that money if they just told a few lies, a lot of them might tell a few lies, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
they've got to be on the hook for something that is materially important. So I don't like to see deals with seller financing notes less than like 25 or 30%.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
you really want them to be invested in your business for a bunch of reasons. You if somebody refuses to do a seller financing note, it means maybe that they don't believe in the future of the business, that they
Mm-hmm.
know something about the market that they're not sharing with you that gives them less confidence, or maybe they don't believe that you are capable of running the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and all of these are good reasons for you not to buy the business,
Right.
right? So,
Yeah.
I always coach people when you go to meet the seller face to face, they think they're trying to sell the business to you, but you need to act like it's a job interview. You
Mm-hmm.
need to demonstrate your competence, your capability, your ability to be an operator of the business because you want the seller to see you as the ideal new steward of the business, right? And if that
Right.
seller can say, "Oh, you know what? Sophia, she knows what she's doing. She'd be a great owner. She could really run this place, and she obviously knows what she's doing." Um, it's only when they have that kind of attitude about you that they're even going to consider financing part of the transaction because they're literally lending you money to buy their business,
Mm-hmm.
right? So so you have to demonstrate the fact that you're going to be great at operating the business. And for most sellers, if they're going to sell the business to retire or something, if they say I need my money for retirement, I can't finance you, then the obvious retort to that is, well, I'm going to offer you, 6 or 7% on this note. Where are you going to invest your money to earn that guaranteed?
Yeah, it's a
Like
very good
you,
point.
these seller financing notes are really great investments um,
Mm-hmm.
if the new owner is going to be successful, right?
Right.
And so this is the thing is that the seller financing actually aligns the interest of you and the seller. Because not only then do you want the business deal to be successful and your new business to be successful, but now you get the seller who wants you to be successful and your business deal to be successful, because that's the only way they're going to get their money. And so not only do you have the advantages of the offset clause to protect you if something's wrong with what they said or told you about the business, but you've now got this person who's really willing to be your coach and give you advice
Mm-hmm.
because they want to see you succeed. Whereas if you owe them 5%, like, you know, I don't know, like credit card uh, companies charge merchants 2.5%, 3% sometimes, right? So
Right.
losing 5% on the sale of the business is pretty much just like selling it to someone on a credit card. It's it's easy to walk away from that 5%.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you in terms of aligning interests. I think that's the one area where I feel that I need that for my own peace of mind, if you will, especially with just the risk of, transferring the business. Are they, I have, of course, you can structure uh, it differently in terms of like the training period and whatnot. But I do think there are going to be things that come up later on beyond that, and I'd like to be able to just, hop on a quick call or, ensure
Yeah.
that they'll be there to answer that question I have, or assist in some way. So I do think now, and as far as the seller financing piece of it, I've heard different things, but it seems that some sellers nowadays want you to personally guarantee it, or they want it collateralized against real estate. Um, what have you seen, and how
So
can we keep it to just against the business?
yeah, so that is their attorneys. So
Hmm.
so you can offer to buy the business with a seller note, and by the time the seller gets to their attorney, their attorney's job is to look for risks and try to mitigate it. And so their attorney is saying, "Oh, you're going to lend this person money? Well, we should get a personal guarantee. We should get them to give us collateral against their house and all this other kind of stuff." So, you know, number one, if the business is worth as much as they say, then the business is the collateral,
Mm,
right? And if somebody
right.
says, "No, I want you to put up your house as collateral," you can say, "Wait a minute. I thought the business was worth all this money. And now you're telling me you don't think it's worth anything for collateral?"
That's a very good point.
Right? So that's number one. And number two, the personal guarantee. Um, Everything is negotiable. So let me give you an example. You can say, "No, I'm buying a cash flowing, profitable business. This business is going to make money for me just like it did for you. The business can more than afford this loan. And so
Hmm.
I think the business guarantee is enough." And if they say, "No, I doubt your commitment level or something, I want
Okay.
you to personally guarantee it," then you can come back and say, "Okay, I'll personally guarantee the first 24 payments." Like, so it's
Mm,
not even binary. It's not yes or
okay.
no. You can take it and
Oh,
divide it even further. You can say,
okay.
"I'll personally guarantee the first 24 payments then. If anything happens
Hmm.
in the first 2 years and the business fails, I'll make that payment for you until 24 months."
Okay.
So,
I like that.
but you can say, "I don't know what's going to happen beyond that. Nobody knows the future.
Right.
But 24 months from now, my bank loan principal will be paid down. My note to you will be paid down. The business should have grown by then. Certainly with inflation,
Hmm.
prices will be higher. So the business should be a lot stronger in 24 months.
Hmm.
And if it's doing well now and it continues to do well, we should be good. So I wouldn't be worried after that. But if you're worried about me and my ability to run this business, I'll guarantee it for 24 months. And that's just an example of what you could do.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know that certainly opens up more creativity on this end. Um,
Yeah.
okay. No,
Um,
that's great.
the you can always offer $400,000 worth of dress samples as collateral.
Is that number three?
The the but here's what my gut is telling me on this though.
Okay.
Is this $240,000 of SDE? We already know that their asking price is just way high as a multiple of
Right.
SDE. They're asking four times, right?
Right.
And we also know that this SDE is inflated because it doesn't represent the true expense of the samples.
Right.
So, because they've been accumulating it in inventory instead of expensing them. And
Right.
so that means the earnings are actually lower. So,
Okay.
if the SDE is really 170, you multiply that by 2.8, we're at about 500 grand. We're at
Hmm.
half what they're looking for, right?
Right.
So, I would go to the meeting. I would check the
Hmm.
place out. I would really see if it's something you like, if you're interested in it. Um, I would ask the questions that we reviewed together so that you can do a proper adjustment on the financial statements. And then if it turns out that I'm right and that a reasonable
Hmm.
offer on this business is 500,000 less the deposits, right? So now
Right.
we could be down, you know, 450 or I don't know what, right? No,
Right.
they do 2 million a year in sales, right? So if the
That's correct.
deposits, if they're doing, um, if there's 600,000 in sales outstanding and they've got deposits on half of that, that's $300,000.
Hmm.
So now you're talking about handing her 200 grand to take over her business,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so you can hear, I can see the disappointment in her face from here. Um, like you can, people who make really, really low offers tend to upset the seller, right? And so
Yes.
if you like the business and you may one day want a shot at buying it, upsetting the seller is not the way to do it. And so if it does turn out that what you end up with is what I've just described, like, oh, it's worth half a million less the deposits. Now I'm talking about 200 grand. The best way to deal with it is to get back to them and say, look, I've looked a lot at this deal. I've looked at your numbers. I think that the way you're treating the samples as inventory instead of an expense is not quite correct. When I look at the way I think it should be treated, and I look at the way your earnings are, and then I look at the deposits you've collected that would need to be transferred to me, it would really only make sense for me to pay you quite a small amount of money. I think you would find the offer insulting. So I think what would be best is if you found someone willing to do the deal that you're looking for. But if you ever want to revisit your asking price or the way the deal is set up, please give me a shot to come back and talk to you. You
Okay.
want you want to let somebody else come in and make the $500,000 offer
Right.
because they'll get upset at that person. But then after a while, when they realize no one is willing to give them the price they want, and you know all they're hearing about is that the business is worth substantially less, then and if you've made a positive impression on them, then you might get another
Hmm.
chance at this.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. I feel that in my journey of trying to buy a business here, I've come across this numerous times, and I tended to be the first one in line. Um, and so I end up having to walk away because they're not ready, if you will. They're not ready
Yeah.
to hear the reality of what the business is really worth. Um, so and I've gotten better about maintaining that relationship in the process.
You need to hold the relationship as the number one goal
Hmm. I
because
agree.
if the seller likes you and thinks you're capable and thinks you're qualified and they get frustrated by other sellers or other buyers rather, and they eventually will start to hear what the market is trying to tell them. And unfortunately, part of the problem here is probably the broker because the broker has probably done some kind of analysis and said this is what we can sell your business for.
Hmm.
um, the expectation of the seller may never have been this high. And
Right.
the problem is now that they think they're going to get $1 million, in their heads they're millionaires, and in their mind,
Hmm.
they're thinking about how they're going to spend the money. And for somebody to come along now and logically demonstrate why it's worth half that, they usually then have to go through a mourning period to mourn the loss of the $500,000 they're not going to get,
Hmm.
which was never real money anyway. But
Right.
in their mind, they believed that they had held this value.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something with the broker here. I think that's what also makes this process kind of tricky is managing both seller and broker as a buyer.
It really is hit or miss if you get someone who knows what they're doing or not.
Yeah, that's certainly been the
The
case.
the, the job of a qualified broker is to manage expectations, and just this asking price lets me know that they're not doing that well.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. All right.
All right, well, good luck, Sophia. Thanks for being in the
Well,
audience and
thank
tuning
you.
in, and thanks for having this conversation for everybody to learn from.
Yes, thanks so much, David. You have a wonderful holiday.
I will. Bye.
Bye.